Activists, artists, and citizens from nearly all walks of life and perspectives have struggled to reach beyond the limits of mainstream media. Whether it's Fox News or the New York Times, Rush Limbaugh or Brian Williams, people say they are tired of being talked to or overlooked. They seek to exercise their own rights to free speech, to fulfill a need to hear from independent voices. They exercise their rights and fulfill their needs by creating new avenues for speech, by inventing new forms of communication, and by seizing the microphone to speak to their community. This movement did not begin and does not end with the internet or social media. It is a movement as old as the dawn of mass media. This series will highlight the contributions of alternative media and the challenges citizens face in a political environment that seems to reward only those with the most money, a political environment that does not necessarily reward those with the best ideas or those who serve the critical information needs of their community. We're looking beyond mainstream media. My name is Mark Lloyd. This is a program on low-power television, a service created in the 1980s to provide service to often ignored communities around our country. We're going to interview Peter Tannenwald, an attorney at Fletcher Held in Hildreth, and Tara Ballesteros, who is a communications director at ZGS Communications. But first, a short look at one of the services that OPTV provides.
Our viewers live in two worlds. They are Latino, Mexican, Colombian, Puerto Rican, and yet they are American too. Their lives forever changed here in the U.S., and English language television has become part of their lives. But a heartfelt bond ties our viewers to Spanish language television.
¿Qué pasa? ¿Por qué se callan?
The connection is emotional.
No puedo creer que estés aquí.
Cultural. Personal.
No se los voy a permitir, ¿me oyeron?
It's a familiar and deep connection to home. This is the duality of our Hispanic identity.
¡Es mi hija! ¡Devuélvemela!
Like our viewers, we combine the best of two worlds. Telemundo brings them the highest quality Spanish language content that respects their traditions and embraces their new reality.
Low-power television. Why was it started, and what is the real difference, at least at the FCC, between low-power television and full-power television?
It was started for really 4 reasons. I think one of the driving forces was to allow small businesses to have an entry into the broadcasting business. And that economic model is an outlet for not only small businesses to provide broadcast programming, but small businesses to have an affordable advertising vehicle over the airwaves. It also had the minority and female ownership aspect that you considered, and it was also an entry, or is an entry-level place for people who want to start careers in broadcasting. I think the FCC was interested in it for those reasons, but also because it creates a lot of spectrum efficiency, or more spectrum efficiency than they had before. Mm-hmm. Television stations that are at high power levels have to be a certain number of miles apart. You can put low power stations sometimes in between where you can't fit a full power station. So it brings service to small communities, small businesses, and it makes more efficient use of the spectrum.
Could you talk a little bit about what sort of services
Sure.
a local low-power TV?
So we own the local Telemundo affiliate here in DC. It's a Class A LPTV. All of our stations are promotionally driven and super community oriented. We have local news and community affairs programming at all of our stations. So we really cater to the communities where we're in which we serve. We're in a different markets. So here, maybe it's very Salvadoran, it's South American, we're starting to see more Mexicans, more Caribbeans, but in a market like Hartford, it's almost exclusively Caribbean. So we do a lot of different things to serve our community. We have events. We have one here called La Feria de la Familia. It's a grassroots family event, free. where we bring in, different organizations, partners. So really, we are there to service our community, whether it's through programming and/or events and promotions. We think of ourselves oftentimes as the first line of contact, sometimes for newly arrived or people who, Spanish language viewers tend to get a lot of their information, or Spanish language speakers get a lot of their information via television. So we take that responsibility very seriously.
There are more low power stations than full power stations today. They represent, I would say, more than 90% of the ethnic programming services in the country. They are available in small communities, 100,000 and less, that can't support a full power station. They're affordable, and they are entry level for careers. I think it's met all of the needs.
So why do I have the impression, perhaps I'm giving the impression, that somehow low power television, despite these successes, is having some challenge?
Well, they have challenges because the regulatory structure has proceeded and has left them out at many stages. When we tried to get must-carry on cable for them, it didn't do very well in Congress. The lobbying was pretty strong against it, and so it was limited to below the top 160 markets. When we wanted to get Class A television for permanent spectrum, it was cut off in 1999 and new people couldn't get in the door. The cable companies for a long time cried channel scarcity. They couldn't carry us voluntarily, but in today's digital world they still don't want to carry us. We're competitors for selling local advertising. The digital transition came along and the FCC put a freeze on Class A applications and made a lot of low power stations change channels, and of course nobody paid the cost of that except the low power stations. So no matter which way you turn, there's either a regulatory obstacle, a large industry obstacle like cable, or expenses being put on you like being forced to change channels frequently. Those are tough burdens for small businesses.
So let me make sure that I understand this correctly. We have a service where new entrants have been allowed to come in more easily than they've been allowed with services like full power television. We have a service that now provides direct service to communities that have otherwise been overlooked by many full power broadcast operations, sometimes in language. But somehow this does not seem to be valued by the politicians in Washington or the regulators in Washington. What's going on here with this? How is it that such clearly a valuable service has been left behind?
I think there are a couple of reasons. First of all, you have a group of people in Washington who think that spectrum for television programming is all wasted and that it should all be on alternative delivery mechanisms, even though we may have to pay for those. And keep in mind that a lot of this ethnic programming is on extra cost tiers on cable. It's not that it isn't available, it just costs a lot of money. That's part of it. I think there is a certain amount of resentment maybe at the FCC that a lot of these stations got in the way of the full power digital transition when you had to give every full power station 2 channels. They wiped out a lot of low powers, but they couldn't wipe out the Class A's, and it was an annoyance. And then in the end, I think the bottom line is the reluctance of the low power industry to come to Washington and make its case. They don't want to spend the money, or they're afraid. They chat among themselves on the internet. And while I don't like to be critical of an industry I do a lot of work for, I think there is a contrast with the low power FM industry that had the Prometheus group here every day pounding the pavement, and they're now the little favored people, whereas the low power people who stayed around the country working to get their television service on the air missed the boat to a large extent because they didn't make their presence known here.
Now Tara, I know part of your work is actually to lobby, to liaison with members of Congress, and you've been doing this for a while. I mean, is it your sense that members of Congress and folks at the FCC really do not appreciate service to the Latino audience?
I'm not sure I would say they don't appreciate service to the Latino audience. I think in all the meetings that we've had on the Hill and all the meetings that we have with FCC, I think both do really realize the service that it provides. I'm not sure they're able to, or from what we've seen so far, come up with a solution to save this service or to make this service flourish. I mean, as you mentioned, with the diversity of ownership, entry into the industry, the communities that it serves, and I think all of us in the low power industry have volunteered to be part of the solution. I think many of us just, especially those of us that are interested in staying in broadcasting, we just want to be able to compete. We want to play fairly, and we're pretty confident that if we are given permanency or if we're given access to the distribution systems, that many of our stations do and are able to compete with the full powers. With we're all serving different audiences, but we feel very strongly that our programming. We do a lot of community-based programming, a lot of local programming, and there are full powers that don't have any type of a public service obligation that the Class A stations have. And my experience has been that many LPTV operators and LPTV stations who may not have Class A status, who missed the window or for whatever reason, there are a lot of LPTVs that meet that obligation, the same one that Class A's. And so I think unless we put our heads together and figure out a way to continue this service, it's going to be, it's a shame because we are serving, whether it's urban, rural, ethnic, foreign language, religious, and something that you said at the beginning that really we have to remind ourselves, those of us in the industry, our audience doesn't know whether they're watching full power, low power, or Class A. I mean, they turn on their TV set and they watch what they want to watch. And so if their LPTV is Spanish language or religious and it goes off the air, I mean, I think there's going to be some pretty, disappointed viewers. I would also say, to Peter's comment about the LPTV industry, I think my company is fortunate in the sense that we have the backing of one of the major Spanish language networks in terms of the program we provide. There are a lot of, small businessmen and women who own LPTVs, and they don't have a large station group. They may have one, two, just a couple of stations. And so I think that makes it more challenging to organize and to speak and to share all the successes. Because if you travel around the country and, several people have looked at it, there are a lot of really compelling stories, whether it's, news from the State House or football on Friday nights, whatever it is. There's a lot of good programming that comes out of LPTVs and Class A's.
So someone who might rely, say, on market considerations when they think about what is it the government should do or should not do, might say, if low-power television is providing such valuable services and if you're doing well and you've got a growing audience base, then why can't you just compete in the market? Why do you need the government to do anything? What would you say to that? Why can't LPTV, if you're providing a valuable service, just compete and win and be fine?
I think that when you're competing for a valuable resource,
like Spectrum.
Mm-hmm. And your audience is, say, 10% of what a full power station's audience is, you're asking the regulators to make a value judgment that your content is important to preserve. I think there's an argument for doing that, notwithstanding the reluctance that many of us have for the government to make any decision about the value of content. But I think they're also reluctant to get into it, and we're up against a very strong driving force for Spectrum for broadband. And if you combine that driving force with all the money and political power that is behind it against little guys, and you overlay on that some people who think that we shouldn't use Spectrum for television at all, you got a rough road.
So one of the things that you are suggesting is that right now there is a tension between the national goals to have essentially wireless internet service, robust, high-speed wireless internet service, and the existence of this service that has been opened up to provide opportunities for entrepreneurs who don't have opportunities in full power, and to provide service to audiences that have been underserved. Why would there necessarily be the tension between those two things? Like, why can't you say, well, let's provide low-power television an opportunity to bloom and thrive, and if we're going to impose any extra penalties or extra challenges, that we'll impose those challenges on the incumbent big players. So why not that? Why the tension between the little guys and the future? That's what it seems to be.
Well, I think there's always been tensions between the little guys and the future. I think that if you put enough value on these diverse services, the first thing you have to do is to get away from the conclusion that why don't they all become websites? And when we give all the wireless to everybody's tablets, you can watch them on those websites. Well, the country's not ready to shut down television yet. Television is still broadcasting a common experience to viewers in the community. They can talk about the programs the next day, share ideas. We're not ready to get rid of broadcasting yet, if we ever are. But there are some things that you could do if you wanted to preserve the opportunities that low-power TV offers. Just one off the top of my head is to allow them to participate in the broadband revolution. If you unlocked low-power TV stations from the ATSC television standard that we're using today, they could provide broadcasting and other types of data, including individually requested data, which is what broadband is about, in small communities within a year or 2 years. But the regulators don't want to do that because, well, there are different people who have different views, but I would say the predominant view is the government wants auction revenue and this wouldn't provide any.
So Tara, you were going to jump in there.
Well, I mean, one of the challenges that I see, or the challenges I see it, is, you know, LPTV is classified as a secondary service for whatever reason at the FCC. Mm-hmm. It is the low-hanging fruit. So it's the easy target when you're looking at a national initiative to reclaim spectrum and to have this broadband plan. And so for that reason, you know, I think we're looking at, okay, it's a secondary service, let's get rid of these guys, or let's move these guys, or figure out a way. I mean, I don't think that we're, like I said, we've all volunteered to be part of the solution and to figure out whether it's through channel sharing, whether it's with new technologies, trying, you know, bottom line is we want to stay in business, we want to continue to serve our audiences. So that's what I think our industry is trying to do, and we're trying to offer up solutions. Again, in order to do this based on regulatory things, we're going to have to think outside the box, and I don't know if we're ready to do that.
So Peter, you are.
Well, I'm thinking, you know, low-power TV is a secondary service, but it was made a secondary service by a decision of the FCC. And if it became good enough, as many of us think it did, there was no reason why the FCC couldn't make at least some of the stations primary. By making them secondary, it's a way of saying, when we want to do things in the future, you won't be in our way. But you can't do that when something gets valuable enough. We had to go to Congress to get Class A passed. The FCC wouldn't do it. So, and we didn't get enough out of Congress. We got one opportunity. But the idea that it's secondary doesn't do much for me, because you should be able to advance your status if you prove your worth.
And for the viewer at home, the notion that it's a secondary service is meaningless. This is a service that they're relying on and depending on. They don't, whatever.
It's a primary service for many people.
So if you could talk for a minute about the importance of cable and some of the challenges that LPTV has faced with regard to its relationship with cable.
Well, cable is important because, cable and satellite, because, whatever percentage you'd like to pick, 85% of a country watches television over a wired system, and a lot of young people don't even know there's another way to do it. So you lose an important part of the audience if you are not on that distribution system. Cable companies don't like the idea of carrying low-power TV for a large number of reasons. They certainly don't want the government to tell them what they have to do. So that if the government were to tell them, that just gets their back up. Low-power TV sells advertising at lower rates than full power and is a bigger competitor to cable's local sales. Some low-power TVs are lousy, and they don't want them on because it's not good service. So if you start to ask them, well, carry the good ones, now you're asking them to make a content judgment, and it's easier for them to say, why don't we just drop all of it? I don't like that result, but I think all of those are factors.
So, Tara?
I mean, I would echo everything that Peter says on that. The challenge is that, we're going in from a disadvantage to access all the distribution systems. In some of the markets, depending on capacity, we've been fortunate enough to get onto some of the satellite systems. We're carried on all of the cable systems, but there again, we go back to the permanency. There is no permanency, which makes it very difficult to operate a business and to grow and expand. If you don't know, that within 30 days, a cable company can pull out and say, okay, we don't want your channel anymore. That's a hard way to access capital. It's a very challenging business plan. So, like Peter, there's a lot of different reasons, I think, that the cable operators and satellite will tell us, capacity being the biggest one, but I think now it's gone. And with the programming, we have very valuable programming, and there's a lot of LPTVs where the programming, I think, is more valuable than some of the full powers.
Now, if you had a very influential, I won't say wealthy, but let's just say very influential member of the public, in front of maybe the chairperson at the Federal Communications Commission or an important member of Congress with oversight, what would you want that member of the public to understand and to do and to say to their elected officials?
That the low-power TV industry is an important outlet for ideas and cultural material that is not going to get on full-power television. And if you want a diverse country, a democratic country, a country that shares ideas and that grows in diversity, you must have an outlet for these ideas.
It's an outlet that supports diversity. It caters to the communities that it serves. It's not a network or a station that comes in and broadcasts the same thing to everyone. We work really hard to provide relevant programming and content to the audiences that we serve. And if these local voices disappear, I think that's a real challenge, and it's a real shame for this country to have these voices disappear.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about then some strategies. So, for example, Peter, you've filed comments suggesting that LPTVs could share channels. So how much channel sharing should occur in order to fit, because there's these broadcasters, and if you look at the 4 in DC, for example, the 4 LPTVs, I think each of them are single stream. So a single stream over the air is 1 to 2 megahertz, and you can certainly easily fit 2. In fact, the government will be paying the full power guys to fit 2 stations on a channel. So to what degree is channel sharing a solution? And alternatively, what about giving preference to the LPTV stations that will continue to broadcast diversity of content? In other words, what you were talking about, the voices and providing the diversity, like minority language channels and so on. Should they have, in the repack, should they have preference over secondary stations that perhaps are going to be converted to another purpose or that are only construction permits and not actually broadcasting?
We've been advocating for that for a long time, whether when Peter talked about working towards must carry or permanency, that those stations providing diversity of programming, local programming, whatever it may be, that it's a service to their market, to their community, but nobody has been willing to define what that is.
I'm very uncomfortable with content judgments. For example, even if you wanted to go so far as to say, well, the Chinese language programming in Washington is important because there's no other outlet for it, would you then look and see whether they repeat the same 4-hour slot 6 times a day, or whether they have 24 hours of different programming? What I think the Commission needs to look at, first of all, the Commission needs to decide it wants to find a solution. Once you get past that point, there are a number of things which might work or might help. Channel sharing is an obvious one, and I don't see any reason why the Commission shouldn't permit it. It's a business problem for low-power TV because if everybody else has five streams and you have only one, your economics are squeezed, but that's for individuals to decide. The second thing would be looking for a way to have low-power technology, TV technology, in spectrum that's not usable for other purposes. For example, if you used a distributed antenna system for low-power TV, and each distributed antenna had no more than 1,000 watts of power, you had 10 of them in a community, you are no longer more powerful than the wireless guys, and you can use the guard band. I understand the white spaces, people will go nuts over that, but the point is there are ways to avoid interference between television and wireless that might work for low-power TV and not for full-power TV. The alternative technology thing is a third idea, but just within the scope of traditional broadcasting, there are ways you could look to make this possibly work.
I'm a small business person who has scrapped and struggled to serve my community. And incidentally, when you're talking about the First Amendment issues, I started as a home shopping guy, did well enough to bring the first Spanish language programming to the state of Oregon. If somebody had made a value judgment then about my home shopping, I never would have been able to be the guy who brought foreign language to the state. So you can't do that, but what I'm concerned with is even if it did work, I'm not sure I can afford to throw out everything I own because somebody said, move over there, little guy.
What about buying big antennas for all your viewers who can't use their little loop anymore?
Well, that's absolutely true as well. And people underestimate constantly the value or the cost of changing your identity. If I'm channel 16 and now I'm channel 3 or 2, there's a huge value. And in fact, I will tell you, during the Converter Box program, I begged the FCC to make the boxes automatically, once a month, rescan to find new channels, knowing this day was coming. They told me to pound sand. So now I've got to get everybody to go reprogram something they barely even know how to use. People need to apply some logic here. There are solutions, but the solutions can't be simply putting on blinders and ignoring the realities. Crushing small business out of existence because it doesn't have the ability to play in the big leagues is no way for anybody to take pride in keeping this country's communication diversity going.
I mean, we, back in the digital transition at these large community events, we got to the point where we were giving away analog pass-through converter boxes to make sure that our stations would continue to be seen. And when we talk about a value judgment, I in no way meant to imply that some stations are better or more valuable programming or whatever it may be. But what I do, working on behalf of my company and with the groups that we've worked with, I think all LPTV operators, they're innovative, they're small businesses, and they want, like I said, they want to be part of the solution.